Rain streaked down the glass facade of the Patterson Tower, turning the neon lights of the city into blurred streaks of gold and crimson. On the 42nd floor, laughter spilled out from a lavish penthouse, the kind of place where the champagne never stopped flowing and the air always smelled faintly of imported lilies. On social media, the world had already seen the inside. Just an hour earlier, a photo had been posted. A woman in a silky red robe, hair tumbling over her shoulders, holding a glass of vintage Dom Perignon, standing in front of floor-to-ceiling windows with the Manhattan skyline behind her. The caption read, "Breakfast with the best view in the city. Penthouse life, love him." Her name was Alice Munro, 27, ambitious, beautiful, and currently draped over the arm of one of New York's most powerful men. She wasn't his wife. Down on the street, in the shadows of the rain-slicked avenue, a black SUV idled at the curb. Inside sat a woman with one hand resting gently on the swell of her belly. Her other hand gripped a worn leather clutch so tightly her knuckles were pale. She was 6 months pregnant, and her eyes, deep, steady, and cold, were locked on the glowing windows of that penthouse. Her name was Rachel Patterson. Just a year ago, those windows had framed her life. The penthouse had been her sanctuary, her dream home, a gift from her husband, billionaire tech mogul Zachary Patterson. He had promised it was their forever place. Now it was nothing more than the backdrop to her humiliation. Rachel had seen the post within minutes of it going live. Not because she followed Alice, she didn't, but because it was already being passed around by society gossips, tagged with cruel little comments like, "Guess who's moved in?" and "That was quick." For anyone else, it might have been a simple sting of betrayal. But for Rachel, it was worse, because despite the divorce being finalized just 2 months ago, the deed to that penthouse still had her name on it. She owned it outright. She had paid for it, with her money, her investments, her sacrifices. Zachary had never even covered the property taxes. She could have stayed silent. She could have ignored it. But Rachel Patterson had spent too many years being quiet, being agreeable, being the good wife in a world that rewarded only the ruthless. Tonight, she wasn't going to be silent. Her phone buzzed in her lap. It was a text from her younger brother, Michael, a sharp-witted real estate developer who had been her confidant through every fight, every heartbreak of her marriage. "I've got the crew ready. Just say the word." Rachel typed back 3 words. "Do it now." Minutes later, a white panel truck rolled up to the base of Patterson Tower. The driver, wearing a baseball cap pulled low, stepped out and began unloading enormous rolls of vinyl. Another man followed, carrying heavy-duty rigging equipment. The rain had eased into a mist, and the city hummed with the low roar of late-night traffic. No one paid much attention, not at first. But as the men began unfurling the vinyl and attaching it to the scaffolding just across from the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows, heads started to turn. From her SUV, Rachel could see it coming together. Bold black letters on a pristine white background. It was 10 feet high and ran the entire width of the building opposite Patterson Tower. By the time the last clamp was secured, the message was clear. "I own this place." The words screamed across the skyline, facing the penthouse like a direct challenge. Anyone looking out from those glass walls would see it. Anyone scrolling on social media would see it soon enough. Rachel allowed herself the smallest smile, not a smirk, not gloating, just the quiet satisfaction of a woman reclaiming what was hers. Upstairs, Alice Munro's phone began to buzz with notifications. She glanced at the screen expecting compliments on her post. Instead, her smile faltered. "What the hell is this?" she murmured, walking toward the window. Behind her, Zachary was pouring another drink. "What's what?" he asked lazily. She stepped aside, letting him see. Across the street, lit by the city's glow, the banner blazed like a verdict. His jaw tightened. "Rachel?" In the SUV below, Rachel's phone lit up again. This time it was Zachary calling. She let it ring. He could stew in it. Because this wasn't just about a banner. It was the opening move in a game Rachel had already decided she was going to win. She had been underestimated before. By him, by Alice, by everyone who thought her worth began and ended with being Mrs. Patterson. But the thing about Rachel Patterson was that she had built her life twice before. Once from nothing, and once from the ashes of her first heartbreak. She knew how to survive, and more importantly, she knew how to strike back. Her hand drifted to her belly again. She thought of the child growing there, of the kind of world she wanted to bring them into, one where their mother wasn't a victim, but a force to be reckoned with. Outside, a few passers-by had started taking photos of the banner, laughing, pointing, posting to Instagram and TikTok. The story was already spreading, just as she had planned. By morning, everyone in Manhattan high society would know exactly who still held the keys to that penthouse. In the penthouse, Zachary's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from his publicist. "What's going on with the banner? Press is already calling." Alice turned to him, her voice edged with panic. "You told me this was your place." He didn't answer right away, because in that moment, staring at the banner, he realized two things. Rachel wasn't done with him, and whatever she had planned next, it was going to be big. Down on the street, Rachel leaned back in her seat, watching the windows above. She didn't need to see his face to know he was angry. She didn't need to hear his voice to know he was rattled. She checked the time. Midnight. Exactly when she wanted this to hit. This was just the beginning. The banner wasn't the revenge, it was the invitation. The real game was about to start, and the next move would make the banner look like a polite warning. Rachel Patterson hadn't been born into the kind of world that owned penthouses with skyline views. She had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment over her father's auto repair shop in Jersey City. Her mother, a school secretary, had worked long hours and still managed to cook dinner every night, teaching Rachel that strength didn't always look like a raised voice. Sometimes it was just showing up, every single day, even when you were tired. By the time she was 18, Rachel was working 3 part-time jobs while putting herself through business school. She had no trust fund, no wealthy relatives waiting to help her. What she did have was grit and a sharp mind for numbers. She could read a spreadsheet like other people read novels. It was during her final semester at NYU's Stern School of Business that she first met Zachary Patterson. He wasn't the billionaire he would become, not yet. But even then, he had a confidence that made people lean in when he spoke. He was tall, with easy charisma, and the kind of smile that suggested he was already on his way somewhere important. Rachel had been catering a networking event as a side job when they collided, literally, near the buffet table. She'd spilled a glass of water down her sleeve, and he'd offered his napkin with a grin. They ended up talking for 20 minutes in a quiet corner about everything from startup funding to the best pizza in the city. For Zachary, Rachel was different from the women who usually orbited his life. She wasn't trying to impress him. She challenged his ideas, made him laugh, and actually listened when he talked about his dreams of launching his own tech company. For Rachel, Zachary was a glimpse into a world she had only read about, but she was careful not to get swept away. They started dating slowly, meeting for coffee between her shifts, late-night walks through Washington Square Park. He would talk about the future in broad strokes, always with her in the picture. When he finally launched Patterson Technologies, Rachel was there, in their tiny 1-bedroom apartment that doubled as his first office. She handled the early bookkeeping, managed investor calls when his schedule was overloaded, even skipped her own job interviews to help him prepare for presentations. They married in a modest ceremony at a lakeside lodge surrounded by close friends and family. Zachary promised her a life of partnership, where every success would be theirs to share. And for a while, it was true. The company took off faster than either of them had imagined. Within 5 years, Patterson Technologies was valued in the hundreds of millions. Their home changed from that cramped apartment to a sleek high-rise, then to the penthouse Rachel had fallen in love with the moment she saw it. She'd picked the fixtures, chosen the marble for the kitchen, overseen every detail of the design. But success had a way of changing people. At first it was subtle. Business dinners that ran later, weekends spent networking at luxury retreats. He insisted she didn't need to work anymore, that her job was to enjoy their life. Rachel tried to believe him, but she missed the satisfaction of building something with her own hands. She poured herself into charity work, serving on boards, hosting fundraisers in their home. Then came the moments she couldn't ignore. The way he'd keep his phone face down during dinner. The the perfume on his suit jacket that wasn't hers, the urgent trips that always seemed to coincide with events she wasn't invited to. Rachel had confronted him once, gently. He'd laughed it off, accused her of being paranoid. "You've been watching too many movies," he'd said, kissing her forehead as if that would erase the unease curling in her stomach. When she found out she was pregnant, she hoped, foolishly, that it would bring them back together. For a few weeks, it almost felt like it had. He attended doctor's appointments, talked about names, even started sketching out plans for a nursery. But the cracks were still there, widening with each passing day. The truth came to her not from Zachary, but from a friend in their social circle who had seen him at a charity gala, arm in arm with Alice Munro. Rachel had brushed off whispers before, but this time there were photos. When she confronted him, his mask slipped. He didn't deny it. Instead, he told her she was making things harder than they had to be, and suggested they should part ways before things got ugly. Ugly. That was his word for ending a marriage of nearly 8 years while his wife was carrying his child. The divorce was brutal. Zachary's legal team tried to minimize her share, claiming she had no stake in the company's success. But Rachel had been smart. Years earlier, she had made quiet investments in real estate under her own name, including the penthouse they lived in. She never sold it, never transferred ownership. When the ink on the divorce papers dried, Zachary moved Alice into that same penthouse, the home Rachel had chosen, designed, and paid for. And now, Alice was flaunting it online, as if it were hers. Rachel thought back to all the times she'd swallowed her pride, all the times she'd let his behavior slide to keep the peace. She thought about the long nights in that one-bedroom apartment, helping him craft investor pitches while eating cold pizza. She thought about the woman she used to be, the one who didn't let anyone tell her she wasn't enough. That woman was back. So when her brother Michael suggested the banner, she didn't hesitate. It wasn't petty, it was a statement. A line in the sand. A message not just to Zachary and Alice, but to everyone who thought they could write her out of her own story. And it worked. The moment the banner went up, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: control. Not over him, but over herself. Over the narrative. She knew Zachary would call. She knew he'd be furious. And she knew that fury meant she had hit exactly where it hurt. This wasn't the end of the fight. If anything, it was the first blow. And Rachel Patterson had no intention of stopping until every piece of her life that Zachary had tried to take was back where it belonged, in her hands. And the next time he looked out those penthouse windows, he wouldn't just see her name. He'd see everything he lost. Zachary Patterson was used to controlling the narrative. Every headline about him was carefully curated, every photo vetted before release. But tonight, control had slipped through his fingers like water. The banner wasn't just a stunt. It was a declaration, a permanent record now burning across social media feeds. Within an hour, the hashtag #IOwnThisPlace was trending on Twitter. Meme accounts had already paired Alice's penthouse selfie with shots of the banner, adding captions like, "When you forget to check the deed." In the penthouse, Alice paced barefoot across the marble floor, clutching her phone. "Zach, this is everywhere. My DMs are full of, I don't even know, insults, laughing emojis. People are calling me a squatter." Zachary stood by the bar, one hand on a crystal decanter, the other gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I'm handling it," he muttered, though his eyes kept flicking back to the window. The banner seemed to glow brighter in the dark, mocking him. "You said she wouldn't fight back," Alice snapped, stopping mid-pace to glare at him. "You told me she was done, that she'd take the settlement and disappear. Now it's like she's running a PR campaign against us." Zachary poured himself a drink, ignoring the way the ice clinked against the glass, louder than usual, like it was trying to fill the silence between them. "Rachel doesn't understand what she's playing with. She thinks she can humiliate me, but she's forgetting who built this life. I did." Alice scoffed. "She owns this place, Zach. Legally. You didn't even think to change that?" His jaw tightened. "I'll fix it." But deep down, he knew fixing it wasn't going to be as simple as signing a check. Rachel had always been methodical. She didn't make public moves without a private strategy to back them up. If she'd gone this far, she had more in reserve. Down on the street, Rachel was still in the SUV, her eyes fixed on the glowing windows above. She could almost picture him standing there, seething. The thought brought a calm she hadn't felt in months. Her phone buzzed again, this time from her attorney, Dana Harlow. "That banner was bold," Dana said the moment Rachel answered. "But if you're ready to go further, I suggest we do it while the public's on your side." "I'm listening," Rachel replied, her voice low but steady. "Zachary's in the middle of negotiating that government contract for Patterson Technologies, right? The one that requires spotless public records?" "Yes," Rachel said. "He's been bragging about it for weeks." "Then you'll want to hear this," Dana continued. "I have a friend in the procurement office. They've been watching the headlines closely. If there's evidence of mismanagement, or if they think his reputation could damage the project's credibility, the deal could stall. All you'd have to do is..." "Feed the fire," Rachel finished for her. Dana's voice carried a smile. "Exactly." 2 days later, the fire was roaring. Rachel had released a single, carefully worded statement to a well-known business journalist. "It's unfortunate that my former home, which I still own, is being used in ways that compromise its value and reputation. I hope the current occupants take responsibility for their actions." She hadn't mentioned Zachary by name, but she didn't need to. The press did the rest. Within hours, the article was everywhere, accompanied by split-screen photos of Alice's selfie in the banner. Talk shows debated it. Real estate blogs broke down how property ownership laws worked in Manhattan. Zachary's assistant forwarded him a media monitoring report, a wall of red alerts indicating negative coverage. In one particularly brutal op-ed, a columnist had written, "If Patterson Technologies handles contracts the way Zachary Patterson handles his personal affairs, the public should be concerned." At 9 a.m., Zachary's publicist stormed into the penthouse. "We have to respond," she said, dropping a folder thick with printed headlines onto the counter. "This isn't going away on its own." Alice, still scrolling through Instagram, muttered, "Maybe if we post something romantic, show that we're happy." "Romantic?" The publicist cut in sharply. "The internet thinks you're squatting in a pregnant woman's penthouse. No one's in the mood for your couple selfies." Zachary's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID read board chair. He didn't answer. He knew exactly what the call was about. Meanwhile, Rachel was already moving to the next phase. She had scheduled a lunch at Les Jardins, an upscale restaurant favored by society reporters and high-profile attorneys. She knew someone would take a photo. She wanted them to. She arrived in a fitted navy dress that highlighted her baby bump in a way that was elegant, not ostentatious. Michael was already at the table, grinning as he stood to hug her. "You're enjoying this a little too much," he teased. Rachel shook her head. "I'm not enjoying it. I'm reclaiming what's mine." As they ordered, Michael leaned in. "So what's next? You've rattled him. Hard. But you know Zach, he'll try to hit back." Rachel's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's the thing. I want him to. Every time he swings, he'll expose himself more. All I have to do is give him rope." That evening, Zachary finally called her. "You've made your point," he said without preamble. Rachel was in her kitchen, stirring a pot of soup. "I don't think I have," she replied evenly. "You think this is a game? You think humiliating me in public is going to make you feel better?" "No," she said, her voice calm. "This isn't about feeling better. It's about making sure my child grows up knowing their mother didn't let anyone take advantage of her." There was a long silence on the line before Zachary spoke again. "Take the banner down, Rachel. I'll make it worth your while." Rachel almost laughed. "You still think you can buy your way out of this? Keep your money, Zach. You're going to need it." She hung up before he could answer. In the penthouse, Zachary stared at his phone, jaw clenched. "She's not going to stop," Alice said quietly from across the room. He turned to face her, his eyes dark. "Then we make her stop." But even as he said it, he felt the first real chill of doubt. Because for the first time since their divorce, Zachary Patterson wasn't sure he was the one in control. And Rachel? She was just getting started. The next strike wouldn't just target his pride. It would target the one thing he valued more than his reputation. His empire. For days, the banner hung across from Patterson Tower, like an unblinking eye. Tourists stopped to take photos, locals used it as a landmark, and media vans idled in the street, hoping for a soundbite. Zachary had always been a master of image. But this time, he was the image, and it wasn't flattering. Rachel knew she couldn't rely on public embarrassment alone. Zachary was a man who could absorb a PR hit and rebuild. To really win, she had to weaken his foundation. The business that fueled his power. That meant going after his allies. It started with a lunch meeting in a quiet back corner of the Sterling Club, an old money haunt where the servers knew your drink before you sat down. Across from Rachel sat Martin Kessler, a senior board member at Patterson Technologies. His hair was silver, his suit immaculate, and his expression guarded. "I know you didn't come here just to catch up," Martin said, stirring his espresso. "You're right," Rachel replied. "I came because the board needs to know what's really happening at the top." Martin's eyes narrowed. "We all know about Alice. It's unseemly but not illegal." Rachel leaned forward, lowering her voice. "It's not just about Alice. Zachary's been using company resources to fund her lifestyle. Travel, wardrobe, even that penthouse photo shoot she posted. The photographer was billed as a corporate branding consultant." Martin paused, the spoon in his hand stilled. "You have proof?" Rachel slid a small envelope across the table. "Expense reports, credit card statements, all tied to Patterson Technologies. If the government contract review board gets these," she let the sentence trail off. Martin didn't open the envelope immediately. He just looked at her, assessing. "What do you want, Rachel?" "Nothing that hurts the company. I built part of it, remember? I just want Zachary out, for good." Martin exhaled slowly, slipping the envelope into his briefcase. "You didn't hear it from me, but there's a closed-door meeting on Friday. You might get your wish." 2 days later, Zachary was in his office when his assistant buzzed in. "The CFO just canceled your lunch, and Martin Kessler is online too." Zachary frowned, picking up the phone. "Martin, what's going on?" On the other end, Martin's voice was clipped. "There's a problem, Zachary. The board's concerned about your judgment. We'll discuss it at Friday's meeting." Zachary's stomach tightened. "Judgment?" Martin didn't elaborate. "I suggest you come prepared." When the call ended, Zachary stared at the Manhattan skyline. The banner was still there, taunting him. He knew Rachel was behind this. Only she would have the nerve and the information to stir up the board. Meanwhile, Rachel was already preparing her next move. She met her attorney Dana at a small midtown cafe, far from the eyes of society photographers. "I've got the documents ready," Dana said, sliding a tablet across the table. "If Zachary tries to spin Friday's meeting in his favor, we can leak these to the press. Misuse of company funds, undisclosed conflicts of interest. It's enough to trigger a compliance audit." Rachel scrolled through the files, her eyes steady. "Make sure the leak is clean. No one should be able to trace it back to me." Dana smirked. "Rachel, if this works, you won't just take him down a peg, you'll take the whole ladder out from under him." Rachel took a sip of her tea. "Good." Friday arrived with a cold wind slicing down Fifth Avenue. The Patterson Technologies boardroom was a glass-walled fortress high above the city, with a table so long it seemed to stretch into the clouds. Zachary walked in wearing his sharpest suit, his smile practiced but strained. Around the table, faces he'd known for years avoided his eyes. Martin sat at the far end, a thick folder in front of him. "Let's begin," Martin said. "Zachary, there are concerns regarding your recent conduct." Zachary forced a laugh. "If this is about my personal life, it's about company resources," Martin cut in. "Funds allocated to projects that don't exist, payments to vendors with no clear business purpose. We've reviewed the records and the patterns are troubling." Zachary's throat went dry. Those expenses were legitimate. Branding initiatives, client engagement. "Client engagement?" Another board member interrupted, flipping open a page. "A $12,000 shopping trip in Milan? A weekend at a resort in the Maldives? These vendors don't even appear in our approved directory." Zachary's pulse thudded in his ears. He could see where this was heading. "We're not making any decisions today," Martin said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But we are initiating an independent audit. Depending on the results, we may need to reconsider your position as CEO." Outside the boardroom, Zachary's phone buzzed. A notification from one of the financial news sites flashed on his screen. Patterson Technologies, under internal audit amid allegations of misuse of funds. Beneath the headline was a photo, Not of him, but of Rachel, taken during her lunch at Les Jardins. She was smiling, her hand resting on her baby bump, the caption reading, "Ex-wife of Zachary Patterson speaks out on protecting her legacy." Zachary's grip tightened around his phone. She was everywhere. That evening, Rachel sat in her living room, the city lights twinkling beyond her windows. Michael sprawled on the couch opposite her, scrolling through Twitter. "You're on fire," he said, holding up his phone. "Someone made a TikTok of your banner with dramatic music. It's got 2 million views." Rachel chuckled softly, but her eyes stayed on the skyline. "This isn't about going viral. It's about making sure he can't hurt me, or this baby, ever again." Michael's expression softened. "You're getting close. You can feel it, can't you?" Rachel nodded. "But he's not done fighting, and neither am I." In the penthouse, Alice sat on the edge of the bed, watching Zachary pace. "You have to do something," she said. "You can't just let her win." Zachary stopped, his reflection dark in the window. "Oh, I'll do something. Rachel wants a war? She's going to get one." But even as he said it, he knew he was already on the defensive. And in the kind of fight Rachel was waging, defense wasn't enough. Because this wasn't just about property anymore. It wasn't just about pride. It was about survival. And Rachel Patterson had just proven she knew exactly where to strike next. The Monday after the board meeting, Zachary walked into his office before sunrise. The city was still half asleep, but his mind was already racing. If Rachel wanted a war, he would show her what it meant to face him head-on. His plan was simple. Hit her where she couldn't fight back. He still had connections, people who owed him favors, people who could make life inconvenient for her. He called in one of those favors before the coffee in his mug had cooled. By noon, Rachel's inbox was flooded with notices: a surprise inspection for one of her real estate holdings, a sudden audit of her charitable foundation's accounts, even a thinly veiled warning from a zoning committee about permits under review. Zachary didn't stop there. He hired a PR firm to push a new narrative, that Rachel's attacks on him were the actions of a bitter ex-wife trying to cash in on his success. Anonymous sources began feeding gossip sites with stories about her spending habits, her supposed temper, and even whispers that she wasn't as financially independent as she claimed. Alice watched him work from the sofa, her legs curled beneath her. "You think this will shut her up?" "It'll make her think twice before pulling another stunt like that banner," Zachary said, tapping through his emails. "She's forgotten who she's dealing with." Rachel got wind of the campaign almost immediately. Her attorney Dana called her while she was reviewing nursery designs. "He's trying to smear you," Dana said bluntly. "And not just in the press. He's poking around your business interests, trying to find something he can use." Rachel closed the laptop in front of her, her jaw tightening. "Let him look. Everything I own is clean." "Doesn't matter," Dana warned. "If he can't find something, he'll make people believe it exists, and public opinion can turn fast." Rachel stood, moving to the window. The skyline shimmered in the late afternoon light, and there, still hanging defiantly, was the banner. "Then we make sure the public opinion stays on my side." "How?" "I find someone who knows him as well as I do," Rachel said slowly. "Maybe better." That someone came from an unexpected place. It was late Tuesday evening when Rachel's phone buzzed with a number she didn't recognize. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something told her to answer. "Rachel Patterson?" The voice on the other end was deep, measured. "Yes." "This is Ethan Blackwell." Rachel froze. Ethan Blackwell, the elusive billionaire CEO known for his no-nonsense approach and a knack for staying out of tabloids. More importantly, he was Zachary's former business partner. The two had co-founded a tech venture years ago, before a falling out that ended with lawsuits and a quiet settlement. "What can I do for you, Mr. Blackwell?" "I heard about your situation," Ethan said. "I also heard Zachary's been throwing stones. Let's just say, I know where the glass in his house is." Rachel hesitated. "Why would you help me?" "Because taking him down would be satisfying, and because you're not the first person he's tried to steamroll. But you might be the first who can win." They met the next day in the private lounge of a discreet hotel in Tribeca. Ethan was tall, with sharp gray eyes that seemed to read every thought before she voiced it. He laid a slim folder on the table between them. Inside, he said, is everything you need to turn his counterattack into a collapse. Records from our old company, patterns of behavior that will look awfully familiar to your board friends at Patterson Technologies, and one particularly interesting thread about offshore accounts he's been keeping off the books. Rachel opened the folder and scanned the documents. This could bury him. Ethan's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. It will, if you use it right, but be careful. Zachary plays dirty. Rachel closed the folder. So do I. Meanwhile, Zachary was growing impatient. His smear campaign wasn't slowing Rachel down. If anything, she seemed more composed than ever. On Wednesday morning, he stepped into his office to find a headline splashed across a major business news site. Former business partner of Patterson Technologies, CEO speaks out. Pattern of mismanagement. Below the headline was a photo of Ethan Blackwell and a quote that made Zachary's stomach drop. I see echoes of the same reckless decision-making that cost me millions. If the board doesn't act, shareholders will. Zachary slammed his phone down hard enough to make Alice flinch. She's working with Blackwell, he snarled. Alice tilted her head. Is that bad? Blackwell doesn't just talk, Zachary growled. He plays long games, and if he's backing Rachel... He didn't finish the sentence. Rachel didn't waste time. That afternoon, she arranged for a quiet meeting between Ethan and Martin Kessler at the Sterling Club. She didn't attend, but she didn't have to. By the time Ethan left, Martin had more than enough reason to accelerate the audit and to start quietly sounding out replacements for the CEO position. At home that night, Rachel stood by the window, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding a glass of water. Michael sat on the couch behind her, scrolling his phone. People are saying you and Blackwell are a power couple now, Michael said, smirking. Rachel turned slightly. Let them say it. The more they speculate, the less they see what's really happening. Michael raised a brow. And what's that? Rachel's eyes drifted back to the skyline. I'm dismantling him piece by piece, and he doesn't even realize how much he's already lost. In the penthouse, Zachary stared at the banner again, the letters bold against the night. He had thought the war was about property, pride, and public image. Now he understood it was about something bigger, control. And for the first time, he wasn't sure he had it. What he didn't know was that Rachel's next move wouldn't just threaten his position as CEO. It would threaten the empire itself. Friday morning began like any other in the Patterson Technologies boardroom, until it didn't. Rachel had been awake since dawn, sipping tea while the city came alive outside her window. On the coffee table sat a sleek black folder from Ethan Blackwell, its contents already etched into her mind. Today wasn't about threats or warnings. Today was about action. She called Dana, her attorney. File it, Rachel said simply. Within an hour, a formal complaint landed on the desk of the Government Procurement Office. Allegations of financial irregularities, misuse of corporate funds, and potential violations of disclosure laws, all supported by documented evidence. By mid-morning, news outlets had it. Patterson Technologies faces federal inquiry. CEO's leadership questioned amid scandal. At the same time, inside Patterson Tower, Zachary was halfway through a meeting with his senior leadership team when his phone vibrated. His assistant's voice came through the speaker, tight and urgent. You need to see this. He stepped into the hall, took the phone, and scanned the headline. His chest tightened. How the hell did they get this? They're saying a concerned shareholder filed the complaint, the assistant said. Zachary didn't have to guess who that was. Rachel? On the penthouse balcony that evening, Alice watched him pace with his phone pressed to his ear, voice low but sharp. She had been scrolling through her own feed, watching the tide of public opinion turn uglier by the hour. People weren't just mocking her anymore. They were asking if she had benefited from the alleged misuse of funds. Some posts even showed side-by-side comparisons of her vacations and company expense reports. When Zachary hung up, she asked carefully, "Is it true about the money?" His head snapped toward her. "Don't start. I'm just asking." "Drop it, Alice," he cut in, his tone sharper than she'd ever heard it. "You're not here to question me." Her stomach twisted. She'd told herself she could handle the public backlash, that the perks of being with him outweighed the noise. But the noise was growing, and for the first time, she wondered if she was standing on a sinking ship. Meanwhile, Rachel was in a quiet meeting room at the Sterling Club with Martin Kessler and two other board members. The air smelled faintly of leather and old books, the kind of room where careers were decided behind closed doors. "This inquiry gives us grounds to act," Martin said, tapping the folder in front of him. "The audit was already bad enough, but now the government's involved. Investors will demand stability." Rachel didn't smile. Stability doesn't come from keeping a man who treats the company like his personal bank account. The second board member, a woman named Elaine with an impeccable navy suit, nodded. "If we call an emergency vote, we can remove him before the quarter ends." Rachel leaned back. "Then call it. I'll handle the fallout in the press. No attacks, just the truth." That truth hit Zachary like a gut punch 3 days later. He walked into the boardroom to find every seat filled, but the mood colder than he'd ever felt. Martin's voice was calm but firm. "Zachary, this is a vote of no confidence. Effective immediately, the board is appointing an interim CEO until the inquiry is resolved." Zachary's jaw clenched. "You can't do this." "It's already done," Elaine said, sliding a document toward him. "You'll remain on the board for now, but your executive authority is suspended." The room was silent, except for the sound of his pen scratching against the paper. For he signed because he had no choice. Back in her apartment, Rachel watched the news segment play. The anchor's voice was steady, almost clinical. "Patterson Technologies announced today that CEO Zachary Patterson will step down amid allegations of financial misconduct. Sources say the decision followed an internal audit and increasing shareholder pressure." Michael, sprawled on the couch, grinned. "That's checkmate." Rachel shook her head. "Not yet. He's still got money, influence, spa, and the Penthouse." Michael raised a brow. "Still planning to take that too?" Rachel's eyes drifted to the skyline. "I'm not planning. I'm finishing." In the Penthouse, the mood was grim. Zachary sat in the darkened living room, nursing a drink. Alice perched on the arm of the sofa, scrolling her phone. "You're trending again," she said quietly, "and not in a good way." He didn't answer. "Zach," she began, hesitating. "Maybe we should get ahead of this. Do an interview together, show people we're united." Zachary turned, his gaze sharp. "United? The second this gets too hot, you'll be gone." Alice flinched. "That's not fair." "It's true," he said flatly. "Don't pretend you're here for anything but what I can give you." Her cheeks flushed with anger, but she didn't argue. Instead, she stood and walked toward the bedroom, her mind churning. Maybe Rachel wasn't the enemy after all. The next morning, Rachel's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered, expecting a reporter. Instead, it was Alice. "We need to talk," Alice said quietly. "I think I can help you." Rachel's brows rose. "And why would you do that?" "Because I'm starting to realize Zachary isn't the man I thought he was. And because I'm not going down with him." Rachel considered the voice on the other end. This was unexpected. But in a war like this, unexpected could be useful. "Meet me tomorrow," Rachel said. "No phones, no press. If you're lying, I'll know." "I'm not," Alice replied. "I want out, and I think I know how to make him let go of that penthouse." As Rachel ended the call, a flicker of satisfaction crossed her face. The pieces were shifting again. Because if Alice was willing to turn, then Zachary's last stronghold, the home he'd tried to use as a trophy, might not be his for much longer. And when that fell, so would the last illusion of his control. The next afternoon, Rachel arrived at the appointed cafe 15 minutes early. She chose a corner table with a clear view of both the door and the street outside. This wasn't going to be a casual chat. It was a calculated risk. She didn't have to wait long. Alice walked in wearing oversized sunglasses and a trench coat despite the warm weather. Her hair was pulled into a low ponytail, and she carried herself with the hesitance of someone who wasn't sure if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. "You came," Rachel said evenly, gesturing to the seat across from her. Alice slid into the chair, removing her sunglasses. Her eyes were tired, not the kind of tired that came from a late night, but from weeks of public scrutiny. "Zachary doesn't know I'm here," Alice began, her voice low. "And he can't. If he finds out." Rachel leaned forward slightly. "If he finds out, he'll do what he always does. Try to crush you. I've lived it." For a moment, they sat in silence. Two women who had once been on opposite sides of the same man's world, now studying each other with a mix of suspicion and reluctant understanding. Alice finally broke the silence. I didn't believe the rumors at first, about how he treated you. I thought you were bitter. But the way he's been with me since the board took his title, he's mean, cold, like I'm an inconvenience. Rachel didn't flinch. That's because you're not useful to him anymore. Zachary treats people like assets. Once he's done using them, he moves on. Alice's jaw tightened. Well, I'm not going to let him toss me aside like garbage. I have my own leverage. Rachel's interest peaked. Go on. Over the next half hour, Alice laid it out. She had been more than a mistress. She'd been a confidant. Zachary had told her things in moments of arrogance, never imagining she'd repeat them. Offshore accounts, hidden assets, properties purchased under shell corporations. But the most relevant revelation was about the penthouse. Technically you own it, Alice said. But he's been using it as collateral in private negotiations, without your consent. If that comes out, it's not just a legal problem for him. It's a potential criminal one. Rachel's pulse quickened. And you have proof? Alice reached into her bag and produced a flash drive. Copies of the contracts and emails. I made them months ago. Back then I thought I was protecting him. Now I'm protecting myself. Rachel studied Alice for a long moment. You're not doing this out of kindness. Alice met her gaze without flinching. No, I'm doing it because if he goes down, I don't want to be standing next to him. And if I help you, maybe I walk away with some dignity left. Rachel considered that. She didn't trust Alice completely, not yet, but trust wasn't necessary for this kind of alliance. They only needed aligned goals. All right, Rachel said. We do this my way, quietly, no leaks until the timing is perfect, and once we start, there's no backing out. Alice nodded. Deal. That evening, Rachel met with Dana and Ethan in the private lounge of a hotel. She placed the flash drive on the table between them. What's this? Ethan asked, picking it up. Leverage, Rachel replied. Enough to force Zachary to walk away from the penthouse without a fight. Dana connected the drive to her laptop, scrolling through the files. He's been reckless. These emails alone could trigger an investigation, and if the shell companies are tied back to him, Ethan's expression darkened. He'll fold. Fast. Rachel exhaled slowly. Good, because I want him out of that apartment within a week. While Rachel was tightening her grip, Zachary was beginning to feel the walls close in. He had noticed Alice growing distant, shorter answers, unexplained absences. When he asked where she'd been that afternoon, she'd muttered something about seeing a friend and changed the subject. He didn't like it. In his study, he poured himself a drink and stared out at the banner across the street. It was still there, bold and mocking. For the first time, he wondered if taking it down would even matter anymore. Because the war had moved beyond public humiliation. This was about control, and he was losing it. 3 days later, Rachel made her move. She requested a meeting with Zachary at a neutral location, the kind of upscale hotel lounge where deals were made behind closed doors. When he arrived, she was already seated, a folder in front of her. I'm busy, Rachel, he said, sliding into the chair. What's this about? Rachel pushed the folder toward him. Inside were printed copies of the emails and contracts from Alice's flash drive. Zachary's eyes scanned the first page, then the second. His jaw tightened. Where did you get this? Doesn't matter, Rachel said coolly. What matters is that if this goes public, you're looking at more than just bad press. You're looking at legal trouble, serious legal trouble. He closed the folder slowly. What do you want? I want the penthouse, Rachel said. Empty. Within 7 days, you'll sign whatever transfer papers are necessary, and you'll do it quietly. In return, this stays between us. For a long moment, he just stared at her, the weight of the silence pressing between them. Finally, he leaned back, a bitter smile curling his lips. You've changed, Rachel. No, she said, her voice steady. I just stopped letting you walk over me. Zachary exhaled through his nose, then gave a single sharp nod. Fine. You'll get your damn penthouse. Rachel didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply stood, collected her folder, and walked out, leaving him sitting alone with the proof of his own arrogance. That night, Rachel stood on the sidewalk across from Patterson Tower, looking up at the glowing windows. The banner still hung, but soon the space behind it would be hers again. Michael joined her, hands stuffed in his pockets. So it's done? Almost, Rachel said. I'll believe it when I have the keys in my hand, Michael grinned. And after that? Rachel's eyes stayed on the skyline. After that, I decide what the view looks like without him in it. And for the first time in a long time, she knew exactly how that would feel. The papers were signed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Zachary had made one last attempt to stall, sending his lawyer to negotiate minor adjustments, but Rachel didn't budge. She had the documents, the proof, and the leverage. He had nothing left but pride, and even that was cracked. When the ink dried, she walked out of the attorney's office with the official deed transfer in her bag. The penthouse was hers again, legally, indisputably, and with no strings attached. But Rachel wasn't planning to slip back into her home quietly. No, this was going to be seen, remembered. She called Michael the moment she stepped into the car. "It's done," she said. "Good," he replied. "So when do we move you in?" Rachel looked out at the city, the rain streaking the windows. Not move, reveal. This is going to be a performance. The plan came together in 48 hours. A charity gala, one she had been quietly organizing for months, was set to take place in a luxury ballroom just across the street from the penthouse. The guest list included business leaders, celebrities, and, most importantly, a cluster of journalists hungry for something fresh to cover. Rachel booked the date for the very day Zachary had to vacate. That morning, she arrived at the penthouse entrance dressed in a tailored ivory coat, her baby bump framed elegantly beneath. A small moving crew waited behind her, along with Michael, who carried a bouquet of white lilies, her mother's favorite flower. On the sidewalk across the street, reporters were already gathering. Someone must have leaked the timing, but Rachel didn't mind. In fact, she counted on it. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, she stepped inside her home for the first time in months. It smelled faintly of Zachary's cologne and Alice's perfume, but beneath that was the familiar scent of the polished wood floors she had chosen years ago. She walked slowly through each room, her fingers brushing the counters, the walls. This wasn't just a space, it was a part of her story, one she had been written out of. Now she was writing herself back in. While Rachel explored, Zachary was making his exit through the service elevator, avoiding the front where cameras flashed. Alice trailed behind him, a small suitcase in hand. "You didn't have to hide," she muttered. "Yes, I did," he said sharply. This isn't about giving her a show. But as they stepped into the alley, he caught sight of the growing crowd across the street and the giant banner still hanging in place. His jaw tightened. This wasn't a show. This was a spectacle. By afternoon, the gala was in full swing. Guests in evening wear sipped champagne and mingled under crystal chandeliers, the hum of conversation blending with the soft strains of a string quartet. Rachel, radiant in a floor-length emerald gown, moved through the room with calm grace. She greeted donors, posed for photos, and kept one eye on the clock. When the time was right, she stepped up to the microphone. "Before we begin tonight's program," she said, her voice carrying easily through the hall, "I want to thank each of you for being here, not just to support our cause, but to witness something important to me personally." She gestured toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, where the skyline glittered beyond. "For months, I've watched my home from the outside. Tonight, I'm watching from the inside again, and I want you all to know, when life tries to push you out, you have every right to push back in." The room erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, and in that moment, Rachel wasn't just a woman reclaiming her property. She was a symbol. News outlets ran with it immediately. Ex-wife of former Patterson CEO hosts gala in reclaimed penthouse. From banner to ballroom, Rachel Patterson's triumphant return. Clips of her speech spread across social media, paired with slow pans of the glittering view behind her. The hashtag "I own this place" surged again, this time with a wave of admiration. Across the city, Zachary sat in a dim corner of a private club, nursing a drink while the TV above the bar replayed the footage. The sound was muted, but the captions were enough. Her message resonating with women across the country. "Rough night?" a fellow member asked as he passed. Zachary didn't answer. He turned his gaze to the glass in his hand, the ice melting slowly. He had thought losing the penthouse would be just another real estate transaction. Instead, it had become the symbol of everything he'd lost: his image, his influence, his untouchable status. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the last glass had been cleared away, Rachel stood alone on the balcony. The city spread out before her, lights shimmering like they were just for her. Michael stepped out to join her, handing her a soft shawl. "You did it?" Rachel smiled faintly. "No, I'm just getting started." Michael chuckled. "What's next?" She turned toward the skyline. "Making sure he never forgets that I didn't just take back my home, I took back my name." Somewhere deep down, she knew this was the true victory. Not the banner, not the headlines, not even the applause. It was standing here, in her own space, on her own terms, knowing Zachary Patterson could look up from anywhere in the city and remember the night he lost it all in front of everyone. And for Rachel, that view was worth more than any property in Manhattan. Zachary Patterson was not a man who accepted defeat easily. Losing the Penthouse, his CEO title, and the public narrative had wounded him deeply. But in his mind, the war wasn't over. Not yet. Sitting in his dimly lit apartment on the Upper West Side, he scrolled through news articles about Rachel's triumphant gala. Every headline felt like a personal insult. The comments were worse. Strangers praising her resilience, mocking him, even calling her an inspiration. He needed to hit back. And if he couldn't win in the boardroom or the press, he would win in the one place Rachel cared about most, her reputation. The next morning, Rachel woke to her phone buzzing relentlessly. Dana's name flashed on the screen. "You need to see this," Dana said without greeting. Rachel sat up, her pulse quickening. "What happened?" "Zachary's filed a lawsuit. He's claiming emotional distress, defamation, and—" Dana paused, as if reading it twice to believe it. "Alienation of business relationships. He's saying your banner, your public statements, and even your gala were all calculated to destroy his career." Rachel almost laughed. Calculated? Of course they were calculated, but they were also the truth. "Doesn't matter," Dana warned. "He's framing this as a vendetta. If it gains traction, it could drag on for months and cost you more than money. Public sympathy can turn." Rachel's hand instinctively went to her belly. The baby was due in less than 2 months. The thought of a drawn-out legal battle during this time made her stomach tighten. By mid-afternoon, the lawsuit was splashed across financial news sites. Headlines read, "Disgraced former CEO sues ex-wife in high-stakes legal battle." Penthouse drama escalates to courtroom showdown. On talk shows, pundits debated whether Rachel had gone too far. Some defended her. Others questioned her motives. The tide was shifting, not completely against her, but enough to make her uneasy. Michael showed up at her apartment that evening, his face tense. "He's trying to rewrite the ending," he said. Rachel nodded. "I know. And if I don't handle this right, he might succeed." That night, she sat at her kitchen table with Dana and Ethan. The air was heavy with strategy. "We have 2 choices," Dana said. "Fight him in court and drag this out, or make one move so strong it forces him to withdraw." Ethan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "He's gambling that you'll back down to avoid the stress. Don't. This is the moment you go for the kill." Rachel's eyes flicked between them. "The kill?" Ethan slid a folder across the table. "Remember the offshore accounts I mentioned? I have the updated records. If these hit the right regulatory office, he won't just lose the lawsuit. He'll be too busy fighting to stay out of prison." Dana's brow furrowed. "That's a nuclear option." Rachel looked down at the folder, then back up. Sometimes nuclear is the only way to end a war. The next morning, she made her decision. She didn't just file a countersuit. She included a detailed documented complaint to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Within hours, investigators acknowledged receipt. It wouldn't be public right away, but Zachary would know. And he did. That evening his lawyer called him, voice clipped. "They're opening a preliminary review. If they find cause, this could escalate fast." Zachary slammed the phone down, his hand shaking. For the first time, real fear crept in. This wasn't just about Rachel anymore. This was about his freedom. 2 days later, a courier arrived at Rachel's door with a single envelope. Inside was a signed document, notice of withdrawal. Zachary was dropping the lawsuit. No apology, no note, just surrender. Rachel stared at the paper for a long moment before setting it on the table. She felt no rush of triumph, only a deep, steady relief. That night she went for a walk alone. The city was alive with neon and the hum of traffic, but she wasn't focused on the noise. She stopped across from the Penthouse building, looking up at the balcony where she'd once watched sunsets with a man she thought she knew. Now the balcony was hers again. The banner had been taken down days earlier. She didn't need it anymore. She spoke quietly to herself, as if to the life growing inside her. We made it. No one's taking this from us again. Across town, Zachary sat in his darkened apartment, nursing a drink he barely touched. Alice had left days ago. No note, no goodbye. His phone buzzed with messages from former associates distancing themselves from him. On the TV, muted news coverage showed Rachel attending a community event, smiling warmly as she spoke to children. The caption read, "Rachel Patterson, rebuilding and giving back." He turned it off. For the first time in years, Zachary Patterson had no strategy, no angle, no audience, and it terrified him. Rachel returned home to find Michael waiting in her kitchen with a bag of groceries. "Thought you might need dinner," he said. She smiled faintly. "You're good at showing up when I need you." As they ate, she told him about the walk, about the feeling of standing outside the building without anger in her chest. Michael leaned forward. "So is this the end?" Rachel considered the question. "For him, maybe. For me, it's the start of something better." Later, standing by her window, she watched the lights of the city. The fight had taken months, cost her sleep, and forced her to face parts of herself she didn't know existed. But she'd come through it stronger, clearer, and unshakably certain of her worth. Zachary had tried to destroy her, but all he had done was free her. And now, for the first time in a long time, Rachel Patterson was truly, completely in control of her life. The first real snow of the season dusted Manhattan in soft white that morning. Rachel stood by the penthouse's floor-to-ceiling windows, watching flakes drift lazily past the skyline. The city was quieter under snow, as if it too was taking a deep breath before the rush of the holidays. She rested a hand on her belly. The baby kicked, gentle but insistent, and she smiled. "I know," she whispered. "It's almost time." It had been 2 weeks since Zachary's lawsuit vanished from the headlines. The SEC review was underway, but Rachel hadn't thought about it much. His fate was no longer her concern. She'd done what she needed to do, not to punish him, but to protect herself, her child, and the life she was building. The penthouse was hers again, but it didn't look the same. The sleek, cold minimalism Zachary favored was gone, replaced with warmth, plush throws, framed photos of her family, and a nursery tucked into one of the spare bedrooms, painted a soft sage green. Michael had helped her hang the last curtain just the night before. "Feels like a home now," he'd said. And it did. That afternoon, she hosted a small gathering. Not a gala, not a publicity stunt, just the people who had stood by her through every storm. Dana arrived first, holding a tiny wrapped box. "For the baby," she said, pressing it into Rachel's hands. Inside was a silver rattle engraved with the words "Strong from the Start." Ethan came next, quieter as always, with a bouquet of winter roses. "You didn't just win," he told her. "You built something better in the process." Even Alice showed up, looking more relaxed than Rachel had ever seen her. She'd found a job at a fashion PR firm and seemed determined to write her own story now. "You don't have to thank me," Alice said when Rachel greeted her at the door. "But I'm glad I chose the right side," Rachel smiled. "Me too." They laughed, ate, and talked late into the afternoon. No one mentioned Zachary's name. He was a shadow. None of them felt the need to revisit. The conversation was about the future, about the baby, about possibilities. When the last guest left, Rachel stood for a moment in the quiet, letting the silence wrap around her. She thought of the woman she'd been at the start of this. Scared, humiliated, unsure of her footing, and the woman she was now. It was like looking at two different people. That night, she sat on the balcony with a mug of tea, bundled in a wool shawl. Below, the city pulsed with light and life. Somewhere out there, Zachary was dealing with the consequences of his choices. She didn't need to know the details. Michael joined her, leaning against the railing. "You ever think about what you'd say to him if you saw him again?" he asked. Rachel considered it. "Maybe just 2 words. Thank you." Michael turned, surprised. "Thank you?" "For showing me exactly what I don't want in my life," she said. "For forcing me to fight for myself. For making me realize I was stronger than I ever knew." In the weeks that followed, Rachel's focus shifted entirely to preparing for motherhood. She worked with her charity board to expand a program for women rebuilding after divorce or financial hardship. She quietly funded scholarships for single mothers in business school. The press still followed her occasionally, but now the headlines were about her work, not her feud. One morning, as she walked through the lobby with Michael carrying boxes for the nursery, the doorman stopped her. "Mrs. Patterson," he said with a smile, "it's good to have you home." Rachel smiled back. "It's good to be home." When the baby finally came, a healthy, pink-cheeked girl named Grace, Rachel held her close and felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The world outside could be loud, messy, unpredictable, but here in her arms, everything was right. Michael was the first to visit, his eyes misting as he cradled Grace. "She's perfect," he whispered. "She's ours," Rachel said softly. "Not mine. Not mine against the world, but ours." One spring evening, months later, Rachel hosted a small rooftop dinner for her closest friends. The city stretched out around them in the fading light, and the air was full of laughter and the scent of fresh flowers. Ethan raised his glass. "To Rachel, for proving that no matter how hard someone tries to push you out of your own life, you can always take it back." Rachel felt the warmth of their smiles, the strength of their belief in her. She lifted her own glass. "And to all of you, for reminding me that sometimes the best revenge isn't winning the fight. It's building a life so good, the fight doesn't matter anymore." Later, after everyone had gone, Rachel carried Grace onto the balcony. The city lights twinkled like stars, and for a moment, she remembered the nights she'd stood here feeling trapped, small, and invisible. Now she felt none of that. She whispered to Grace, "You'll never have to doubt who you are or where you belong. And if you ever do, just look out at this view and remember, your mom owns this place." Grace gurgled softly, her tiny hand gripping Rachel's finger. Rachel smiled into the night, and in that moment she knew the banner had been just the beginning. The real victory was here, in this life she had fought for, in this view she would never surrender again. So the story has ended. Our wonderful friends, are you still here with me until now? If you are, it means something in Rachel's journey has touched your heart. Maybe it's the reminder that no matter how badly life knocks you down, you can stand up again. As an old saying in heterodox wisdom goes, the wound is where the light enters you. Rachel's pain didn't destroy her. It shaped her strength, her clarity, her power to create a new life. And that same light can enter your life too. If you're facing betrayal, loss, or injustice, remember, you are allowed to take back your space, your name, your story. Now I want to hear from you. What part of Rachel's fight inspired you most? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Like this video if it resonated with you, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking these journeys together.